All right, hey, so an issue that learners often have is how to deal with negative signs when you're adding and subtracting. Now, for relatively small numbers, like single integers, well, that doesn't look very nice. Uh, you usually do the number line, right? So zero, and then you can go by, I don't know, fives. Number line's pretty good. And you can do things like arrows. So you can say, okay, well, let's choose a nice color here. So let's say if we wanted to do maybe 10, and then I'm going to choose red for subtraction. Let's say 10. Well, here, let's just keep the colors the same, right? So let's say 10 plus a negative 5. Okay. So if we're adding these, then we say, all right, now I'm going to go back 5. Zoop. And what's left, this leaves us at positive 5. And that actually is what this is, right? So the way that we think about negatives is that the negative either means opposite, or you can think of this as dollars and cents. So you start off with $10 and then you pay someone $5, or you have $5 worth of debt that you're consolidating. And so when those resolve themselves, you end up with $5 in the positive, which is great. Now, of course, as the negative's bigger, then you're still more in the hole, right? You're more in debt. But the number line's pretty useful for that. Now, let's talk about how a lot of times these are portrayed. So let's say we had positive 14. Sometimes the positive's out there, sometimes it's not. If it's not, and it helps you to have it there, then you can of course put it there. If it doesn't help you to put it there, then don't put it there. And let's say we're adding a negative 16. I think that having the parentheses there is a bit of an overcomplication. So a good strategy is to rewrite this. I also don't think that having a positive sign out front is all that useful to my thinking, but if it's useful to yours, then keep it. Now, since this is a plus sign, we're adding two integer numbers here, right? Two numbers. Then we look and see here, this is plus a negative. Well, if they are different signs, then it becomes subtraction. So this would actually be adding a negative means you're subtracting. Think about it this way. If you have a certain amount of money, you're adding a negative means you're adding debt, which means you owe $16. In this case, you have 14. Well, what's going to happen here, either you use your number line or you do some fancy subtraction, you know it's going to end up being negative because you're subtracting more than you actually have. Okay, well, what if we just pull this out here and we do some traditional subtraction? Now, look, you're like, whoa, look at you. You swapped the numbers around. Yeah, I did, because I know that it's easier to subtract from the bigger number than the smaller. You just have to remember that the overall answer is going to be negative. So I'm going to put my negative sign out there so I don't forget. 6 minus 4 is 2. 1 minus 1 is 0, so I'm just going to leave it alone. And so I get negative 2. And because it's good practice to circle your final answer, definitely do that here. So this means I'm still $2 in debt. Okay, so you used the strategy of resolving this positive and negative by making it a negative because they were different. And then you rewrote it to make it make sense for your brain. If it makes sense this way better, go for it. Now, let's take a look at rewriting that. Let's clear up some space here. Whoop. Let's see. How about, look at me. I'm not being very fancy here, am I? What if we took this problem and instead we made a different problem? So in this case, we had $14 and then we're adding some debt to it. Okay, that's great. But what if we did this way? What if we said we had $14 and now we're subtracting negative 16? Well, there we go. Green. An easy way of thinking about negatives when you're subtracting is that since they're the same sign, there's a negative sign. I'm going to take this one, I'm going to flip it on its head. Whoop, there we go. And then make a positive. Really, what's happening is you're subtracting a negative. So if you talk about dollars and cents, the way I like to think about it is I'm forgiving debt. If you forgive debt, it's like giving somebody that money back. And so all you're really doing, subtracting a negative, same sign, that means that they become positive. You're now adding. So I'm going to rewrite this. Right? Equal sign means what's above is now equal to this. My $14, and I realized, oh, there it is. It's adding. Now, you might be able to do this one in your head, but if not, don't forget the old standby. Does not matter what direction you do this in, the 14 on top, the 16 on top, does not matter. Just make sure your ones and your tens places are lined up. 4 plus 6, do you know your math facts? That's equal to 10. 0, carry the 1. That's 1, 2, 3. You've got $30 effectively. Isn't that something? Okay, so a little change in sign, a big result. So let's just check our thinking here. And we'll do it with another problem. How about a positive 52 minus a positive 6? Okay, let's think about this. So we've got $52, and we're going to subtract an amount of $6. Again, it's easier for my brain if I rewrite this. So minus what? Well, I'm just going to subtract 6. So these are opposite signs, and so if they're opposite, that means that they're going to end up as negative. And that's just one way of thinking about it. Now, can you do this in your head? Maybe you can, but let's practice our traditional subtraction. I've got my ones all lined up. Technically, there's a little invisible 0 here. Hey, if it helps you to think about it that way, go for it. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say, all right, well, I got to borrow from the 5, the tens place. Take 1 away from there. I'm left with 4 here. And let's just change the color. Let's make it easier on our eyes here. That 1 from the tens place represented 10 here. As if I add it in, that means that this is now 12. 6 from 12 is 6. Oop, you know that, right? And then I have 4 minus the 0 in the tens place. Again, if you want to, you can put that imaginary 0 right there. Okay. But it's 46. Now, the cool thing with math is that you can reverse these processes just to check yourself. So if you want to see if you did your subtraction correctly, right, this would be 46, then you just go in reverse. You do the opposite operation. We subtracted, so now we can just add. What do we add? We add what we subtracted. 6 plus 6 is 12. There's a 2, carry the 1. And then I have 4 plus 0 plus 1 is 52. Boom. Back where I started. I'm pretty happy. So this is a good little introduction. The big thing to remember is, well, first of all, do what makes sense to your brain. As long as the mathematics works out, you have permission to do that. But if you have like signs, a plus with a plus, it's positive. A minus with a minus, it becomes addition. It becomes positive. A minus with a plus, however, unlike signs, or plus with a minus, it becomes negative. It becomes subtraction. Now, that does not mean that your answer becomes positive or negative. It definitely depends on which one's first, right? Think about it. If you start off with a lot of money and you subtract some, then you have a positive amount still. If you start out with a little bit of money and you subtract a lot, then you end up in debt, in negative amounts. If you start off with some debt and you add more debt to it, then you have an even greater amount of debt. Anyway, you can take that thought process as far as you'd like.